Hello everyone, this is Priyanka Singh and I'm a mentor at Career Launcher. And today we have with us someone very special. And we have a lovely young girl, Keerthana, who's been ranked AIR 38 in CLAT 2022. So, welcome to this interview, Keerthana. So, how's the feeling? So, when you first saw your result, AIR 38, a two-digit rank, what was it like?
Far beyond my expectations, to say the least, and it felt almost undeserving at first because I didn't expect something that ridiculously good. But overall, I was very,
Mhm.
very proud and thankful, and wanted to share it with everyone who I knew. That was about it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that there's had been a lot of celebrations and congratulatory messages that's been coming across from friends and families, and I'm sure everyone who must be knowing you is absolute proud of you because this isn't something. I'm sure it's a very great achievement. So uh, I think it's time for you to cherish it. So we would start off, our discussion. Was endless was the thing that you were looking at because now you're there.
NLS was actually not the thing I was looking at. So, to be honest, I found out
Mhm.
that an exam called CLAT existed when I found out
Okay.
that the university Nalsar was in my city. So, my aim was
Okay.
actually to write CLAT to get into Nalsar. So, I was like, okay, I need to
Okay.
get a rank decent enough to make it there. And so then I
Mm-hmm.
found out about, the preferences, the different kind of colleges, and like what doing
Right.
law actually means once I joined
Mm-hmm.
coaching and got into that, ecosystem and that environment. So that's what
Right. So you're
happened.
from Hyderabad. Now I
Yes,
can
I live in
understand.
Hyderabad currently. I'm from Andhra Pradesh, but yeah, I moved
Mm-hmm.
here about 5 years ago.
So when is that you actually, this thought came to you? Yes, law is something I'm looking at, and this is something it's going to excite me for the rest of my life. When that
Uh,
defining moment happened for you?
For me, I think from around the eighth grade, I knew that I didn't want to go into the engineering or medical side. That was something that was established a little bit early. So I decided to take
Mm-hmm.
humanities in 10th grade. And at the beginning of 11th grade, I looked at the different options that existed. I looked at, courses that I could take. I was even considering, say, English at one point or, economics or things like
Okay.
that. And then I found that, okay, this law entrance exam looks like it's doable. Let me try to work towards this for the next 2 years and see where that takes me. And then I kept actually, fell further into law after I started preparing for this exam because I don't really have any association with it. My family, like, we have no one who's in the law field. So I
Okay.
kind of found out about it
Mm-hmm.
through, all of this research and figuring out what to do apart from engineering or medicine. And then I found that, okay, for things, since I'm interested in language and the social sciences, this
Mm-hmm.
kind of course would be one that I could take up. That's how it started, I think.
Right. Okay, that I would say that the your decision is the gain for the legal field, and I'm
Ah,
sure you
thank
will do
you.
wonders. Yeah. So, so how would you describe your entire, CLAT prep journey? If you can sum it up from where you started off, what there were some ups and downs. So, if you can elaborate, I'm sure you prepared for 2 years, right?
Yes, yes.
So, how was the journey like uh,
Uh,
when you started off until now?
I'll try to sort of briefly sum it up. But essentially, when I started, I didn't know much about the exam or what it was or what I had to do. So I sort of spent the first year essentially fumbling around and trying to figure out what I needed to do. And, I joined CL's online coaching batch for 2 years. So I began attending classes, figuring out the subjects that I had to prepare, getting books, practicing the fundamentals, reading these news articles and legal articles and all of that. So I think the first year was fairly slow, but towards the second year, so around early 2021, I began doing things like general knowledge. I mean, current affairs prep more seriously. And I think
Mm-hmm.
mid 2021 was when I started my preparation a bit more properly because by then I'd sort of figured out what needed to be done in terms of all of the
Okay.
different sections and all of that. So from that point, around August 2021, I found a friend online who would become my study buddy in the future for the next, I think, 10 odd months up to CLAT and even now. So we began covering the fundamentals again from the basics. And we, covered the basics of logic, of English, of all of that. We began doing daily GK together. We began covering weekly events, all of these things. And around September 2021, I started taking mocks. So that is when my mock journey began. And I remember the first score was somewhere in the 60s, around 66 or 68. And I realized, okay, I'm going to have to write mocks. And I realized that the preparation aspect was in fact less important than the actual exam writing aspect. So I began
Right.
focusing on working on that. I started with I think CL's prime marks began around the end of 2021. I started looking at things like percentiles, and I realized that I was in around the 80 percentiles at that time. So I focused on developing my ability to take the exam better. I focused more on, MCQ based practice and doing events in GK more thoroughly and all of these things. And towards the beginning of 2022, I hit the sort of 90 percentile range. And from that's when I tried to maintain that consistency. And I focused essentially on working on math concepts, working on general knowledge, and focusing on, you know, MCQ based practice for the other three sections. So in this range, I continued my prep for the last 6 months or so. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, what am I going to do in the last 1 month? What am I going to do in the last 2 weeks, the last day? So I wanted to sort of aim to give a CLAT attempt that I would feel no regrets for. So I wanted to do everything possible before that point. So I found other people to discuss my mocks with. I began analyzing them. And at the same time, I tried to finish up my board prep early. So in the crucial months of March, April, and May, I could focus on CLAT. And this carried on more or less until D-Day. In the last 2 weeks, I, of course, revised my GK, went through all of my basics, and went through the notes and tips that I'd made for myself, and then finally gave the attempt. So this was roughly how the last 2 years went on.
There you are.
Went.
Right. 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 So, Kitna, since we talk about that this particular paper is a lot about reading, right? This is a reading
Hmm.
intensive paper. So, were you always into reading before this, or reading happened to you after you decided this is the paper that I want to write? And how I also want you to answer for the people who would be listening to your interview, that how critical or how important is to have a good reading habit if you want to get through this particular paper.
I'd say reading is the most important thing, and I discovered that pretty much when I got into CLAT, because the year that I found out about CLAT was the year the pattern changed, right? So then I found out that this was a reading comprehension based
Yeah.
exam, and I realized that would be, to my advantage, because yes, I have been reading since like the longest time since I was young, and as a result, I realized, okay, reading at least comprehension wise, I will be able to do well. But then as I practiced, I realized that it's more than just comprehension, and you have to have the sort of skill set to be quick about these things and to sort of maintain your accuracy and efficiency while maintaining these sections. So that I ended up working on throughout my prep, and I focused on reading and engaging in that kind of language. So I'd say definitely reading skill is probably the most important thing you can have. And for those who are preparing for a longer period of time, they do end up getting a head start for this kind of thing. Because I spent my first year essentially just reading and absorbing information. I didn't focus much on practice or mocks at all. So I think that ended up working to my advantage, because that made the actual process of giving the exam a lot easier. And I was able to focus more on how I solved the questions in the second part of my prep. Whereas the first was more on how I comprehended and how I was able to read faster or understand the information better. And reading from a lot of different sources helps. I normally do like looking up different kinds of blogs, opinions, articles, and things like that. So I think this factors into both your current affairs prep and your reading prep. So it works both ways. In general, just trying to keep aware and read different opinions, read different kinds of authors and styles. All of this will end up, helping a lot in the final exam. So I found that I was able to write, I was able to attempt the reading sections this year very comfortably, mainly because of that. I mean, the English passages were relatively long, but I found that I could finish them in a faster period of time and maintain accuracy. So I think, yeah, reading definitely helped stay a little bit above, the masses.
Right. And what was your feeling when you saw GK while writing your CLAT on 19 June? And how did you prepare for this particular section? What was the first reaction, when you opened the paper?
I mean, I heard that a lot of people panicked seeing GK, but to be honest, looking at the papers of the last 2 years, I realized that this is not something that we have to, incessantly stress about, because it's something that's completely beyond our control. And like my sort of mantra during CLAT prep was to not worry about things that are outside of my control. So what I knew I could do was prepare events that I felt were most likely. I could refer to different sources. I could look at compendiums, and I could look at these Drishti IAS articles. I could look at the info in my manthans. I would do all of this. And looking at the section in CLAT 22, I was fairly I was sort of enjoying it, because it was something that I was looking forward to see, how they would actually end up giving the events. I remember sitting the evening before, and my friend and I were predicting what kind of events that would
Mhm.
end up coming. We had predicted Russia Ukraine, we had predicted
Right.
AFSP, a few other events. So we were like, okay, you know what? So they're throwing something different at us this time. I was a little bit, I think, pissed to some extent that, there weren't that many relevant events asked. But I found, okay, it's going to be something that everyone's going to have trouble attempting. So let me just do what I can. And I ended up attempting a little bit more than I should have in that section. But
Mhm.
I think I didn't let it phase me per se. I just took it as another section in the exam and, moved on because there's not much you can do in those two
Right,
hours
right.
anyway.
It's just very important to keep your calm inside the
True.
exam hall in here, right? So so apart from academics, were you into any other kind of activities which helped you calm for this paper, which helped you in relaxing, and how important it is for a candidate to have
I
that
think
kind of
actually,
balancing effect?
yes, yes. I think you're very right on that one. That is probably the most important factor, especially this year, because a lot of people lost their calm or didn't attempt the paper the way they wanted to. And I think doing things that you genuinely enjoy and making time for them will most definitely help you stay a lot calmer. So I like music a lot. I play a lot of instruments. My piano's here at the back. Things like that. Apart from that, I think talking to people, genuinely just talking to people and letting out all of the thoughts that you have is like the biggest stress reliever that can exist. So I have a genuine bond of talking about everything to my mother. So we'd like evaluate the horrible mock scores, and we'd look at
Mhm.
what we have to do next, and we even talked about this pressure of, I have to make it in this attempt, that kind of stuff. I think talking about it, my I talked to my mother too, and we were like, you know what, this isn't the end of the world if you don't make it this time around. You can do other things, there are other opportunities. You could even say sit back for 6 months and attempt again. So I think talking about all of those things completely made me, drop all of my pressure or any kind of sort of tension that I had before the exam. Instead, I was able to sort of give an attempt to the max of my potential, and I was completely relaxed before the exam and throughout the exam. And CL was a big part of that too, because the community that CL provides through, these groups and
Yeah.
both mentors and peers, so people that you
Mhm.
talk to. I met a lot of people, I talked to a lot of people, we shared things to each other and we learned from each other. So all of that also, I think, put me at ease, because if you have to tell other people to do something, you have to be doing it yourself and you have to be comfortable with it. So I ended
Right.
up being the kind of, trying to be the best version of myself in those 2 hours and, give the exam without any stress. So definitely doing things like that will help. Overall, the aim should just be, give a regret free attempt, do everything that you can, and, everything else will work out on its own.
Okay, that's one very beautiful thing that you've said, and I always say give your not 100, 150% and leave it to the consortium, not God. That's what I always say. Leave it to the consortium.
True.
Oh yeah, so that's how. So I think one of the most, I would say, favorite section in CLAT, QT. How was your kind of what do you call it, relationship with maths, and how important you would rate, because we have spoken about English and GK, and QT is something majorly people miss out. What is your how you prepare for this particular section?
So, quants in general, my relationship with it was thankfully not very bad, because my last association with quants was in 10th grade. And there I had done wonderfully well. I'd gotten
Hmm.
like really good marks in my 10th boards. And so that sort of impression that I had on math was continuously good because of that. And one of the first things you hear once you get into CLAT prep is that you have to, not miss out on quants. You have to do
Right.
quants properly. And so at first I was just trying to focus on concepts, and mock scores or my ability to attempt math would vary depending on the concept. Of course, things like percents and ratios, I was able to pick up, pretty quickly, and I was comfortable with
Mhm.
doing them. When things didn't come out, I would get lower scores too, somewhere around even say 3 or 4 out of 15. But
Mhm.
in the final paper, I think techniques to manage your time, those are the most important thing when it comes to quants. And that was something that I had practiced a lot. So the more you practice that, the more ease and confidence you get while actually attempting quants in the paper. And so I sort of had that. And as a result, while attempting the, quant section, I was pretty much on autopilot. My body knew what to do with those questions and I attempted them. And more or less, I think the biggest issue with quants is not getting psyched out just looking at the questions or looking at the paper, or thinking about maths as something that's unachievable or far away. So I try not to have any of that and just attempt it in stride again with everything else, because at the end of the day, every section is part of the exam to some extent. So
Absolutely.
give it the time that you need to, and everyone knows where their potential lies, so bring it to the max and attempt. So I managed to attempt a 12 on 15, and I was like the most satisfied with math. I think I was like, okay, I managed to do what I
Right.
planned with math.
Perfect. Perfect. And how about like logical and legal? What were your strategy to tackle these two particular sections?
So I tried to look at the three reading sections as a whole, because at the end of the day, it's just words. I mean, paragraphs and questions on those paragraphs. So what I tried to do, I think the major learning that I got for these three sections was from my mocks. So what I would do is I'd have these OneNote docs where I would make notes to myself while analyzing the mock. So if you get this kind of question, you have to answer it like this. If you get a central idea question, you're going to have to eliminate these kind of options. Or, don't make the mistake of sticking to one impression on an option, and at the end you'll realize that was the answer. Things like that. I made a lot of those kind of tips to myself over the course of, say, 7 8 months of writing the mocks. And what I did was, before the exam, I looked through those completely. So I had like a sort of guide for myself for these three sections, and I tried to focus on what I could learn from practice, because practice is again key for all three of these sections, and of course, to some extent, language, which you can develop over a period of time. Whereas from practice, you can learn every single time. There's something that you can pick up and something that you can tell yourself and learn every single time. So I think making little notes to myself and learning whatever I can for each bit of the section managed to, overall give a good attempt there.
Right. Brilliant, brilliant, Kirtana. So let's have a quick fun section. So, top three things every CLAT aspirant should do.
Okay, should do. So I remember
Yeah.
actually thinking about this. I don't think they're things per
Mm-hmm.
se, but they are sort of qualities that you want to have at any
Mm-hmm.
cost. So they are the three P's that I
Right.
made for myself. One is
Mm-hmm.
perseverance. So you're going to have to
Okay.
come back no matter how many times you go off track, or no matter how many times you feel like dropping everything. So of course there are going to be
Mm-hmm.
bad days, but don't beat yourself up for it. Rather come back, learn from that emotion, learn from that feeling, put it into your CLAT prep. So that perseverance needs to be there. Second, planning needs to be there. I feel like CLAT is not the kind of exam that you can crack only with hard work and sincerity. You're going to have some sort of plan. So I would have deadlines for myself. So I'd say within this month, I'll cover
Right.
these things. Or within the next 2 months, I'm going to cover all of these concepts. Or I'm going to finish these mocks and analyze them. So because I had that, I was able to see the big picture, and I wouldn't feel bad even if I didn't work as hard as I wanted to for, say, 1 or 2 days, because I know, okay, overall, this is what I'm working towards. This is what I want to complete before CLAT. So having that sort of at least rough plan makes you a lot more comfortable and puts you at ease in your prep. And the third would be priorities. I think priorities are very, very important. So for me, boards weren't a priority. At the same time, what was a priority was learning from the subjects that I had at school. So I had subjects like sociology, psychology, economics. All of these actually ended up helping in both the reading sections, in CA, and pretty much everything. So I had the
Right.
priority to learn from my thing, but not worry about the results. And for me, for CLAT, the priority was obviously every Sunday I'm going to give a mock, regardless of what happens, and I'm going to analyze it. So having your priorities, planning, and just persevering through it all will definitely, get you where you want to go.
Right. And three things that one shouldn't do.
Okay, this I would say, for one, I think would be, don't fall into the sort of rat hole of putting yourself down for everything that you do or don't do. So, because it's very easy to fall into that trap and then focus on how demotivated you're feeling instead of actually getting things done. And the second thing one shouldn't do would be is thinking too much rather than doing. So we tend to spend a lot of time thinking of what we have to do versus actually doing it. So I found that doing things makes me feel so much better than thinking about them and worrying about them. So that would be the second thing. And I think the third thing would be closing yourself off from friends and family and a good environment. So it's easy to feel like you have to face all of this alone. But at the end of the day, if we look at it, CLAT is not that big of an exam. It's, after all, numbers and words and questions based on those numbers and words. And we just have
Right.
to bubble things. But we feel like
Right.
it's the biggest burden of our lives. And we feel like we have to carry it all on our own. but I'd say there are definitely people in this world who genuinely care about you. So don't hesitate to share things with them and to make them part of your preparation journey, because that's one thing that you will definitely regret not doing if you feel like you have to do it all alone. At the end of the day, the credit you will take for both your hard work and for your failures. But if you have people, on the ride with you, it'll be a lot easier and it won't feel as big or as scary as, it appears to be, at least, because that's how it feels for a lot of people who haven't actually written the exam. And I thought I would have that too, but I think the biggest factor that made me so relaxed and that managed to help me do well on D-Day was the fact that I had a very healthy environment that I'm extremely grateful for. No sort of pressure, no tension, no, unhealthy competition. All of the peers that I met were so friendly and were people that I was able to share things with. So that would be the biggest
Right.
thing. Don't let yourself deal with it all alone.
Right. I think that sums it all. I think it's about enjoying the process, having the
Definitely.
right people on your side, and it's been lovely interacting with you, Keerthana. And I'm
Thank
sure
you
you're
so
going
much,
to have
ma'am.
a lovely time at NLS campus, and it's a wonderful life out there, because it's very happening. You'll enjoy there. So all the best for your law school life at NLS Bangalore. Best of luck for everything ahead, and thank you so much for giving
Thank
us
you,
time and
ma'am.
sharing your tips and the thoughts that you believed in. And it's just wonderful listening to you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
It was a pleasure.